Hello, listeners. This is Kat. Welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfic. This is the continuation of Swallow the Stars. This will be part 30, chapter 30, entitled Unforeseen Circumstances. All right, get on the bus. Hitoshi blinks up at Aizawa-san from where he's leaning against Izuku. It's way too fucking early for this. It really is. He thought that he could nap during homeroom again, like usual, but the moment Aizawa-san had walked through the door, all of Class 1A was instructed to change into their gym uniforms, with support items allowed, oddly enough, and then they were being herded outside toward a waiting bus that apparently is going to take them on a field trip of all things. Maybe it'll be a long enough drive for him to nap in the seats, but he doubts it. After the chaos of yesterday, the whole class now looks at Izuku for guidance, and though it makes Izuku blush, Hitoshi thinks that's the only correct course of action. Izuku is smart, competent, and caring, and he has a watchful eye on everyone at all times, so he notices little things that most people miss. Hell, he'd gone out of his way to check on Hagakure yesterday to make sure that she was all right. If anyone in the class had to be the president, Hitoshi is glad it's Izuku, because Izuku makes him, and everyone else, feel safe. That was proven yesterday during lunch, and it's proven today when Izuku stands by the bus doors and directs everyone on board with a soft, "Be orderly and don't rush," which they all listen to. Aizawa-san is off to the side looking for all the world like he just wants to go back to sleep, especially with Hizashi-san trying to talk his ear off. But Hitoshi sees the way that they both look at Izuku with what Hitoshi recognizes as proud parent eyes. Once everyone else is on, Yaoyorozu boards, then Izuku and Hitoshi somehow manages to climb the steps with his chin on Izuku's shoulder the whole time. The seats are wide enough to fit 3 people, but Yaoyorozu heads to the back seat to sit with Jiro, leaving Izuku and Hitoshi their own seat up front. "Gonna sleep on you," Hitoshi warns, already curling into Izuku's side. Izuku laughs like it's a joke and nudges Hitoshi vertical. "Nope, no you're not. You're going to drink your coffee and try to wake up. It's not that long of a drive." "Do you know where we're going, Izuku?" Asui leans over the back of the seat and blinks at them. I cannot confirm nor deny my knowledge about the morning's events," Izuku says, earning a grunt of approval from Aizawa-san, who is only 2 seats in front of them. "No one told me anything, but I am really familiar with the campus layout, and I know that they wouldn't let first years off campus this soon in the semester, so I've made a guess, but I don't want to spoil the surprise." Asui tilts her head, but her expression doesn't change. Hitoshi wonders vaguely if it even can. Her mutation is widespread and, though insanely cool and useful, not altogether human. But she seems nice enough, and Hitoshi isn't one to judge anyway. "Izuku, can I ask you something personal? I don't really have the best filter." "Oh, sure, Asui-san." Izuku twists around a little in the seat so that he can look at her better. "Just call me Suyu," she says with another blink and a croak like a frog. "Suyu, then." Hitoshi snorts and decides to take Izuku's advice on drinking his coffee before he gets smacked for laughing. Asui croaks, apparently pleased even if her expression never changes. "I heard about the way you handled yesterday in the cafeteria, and I'm curious if you've been in a villain attack before. Apparently, you didn't seem very scared." Hitoshi feels Izuku flinch beside him, and he's quick to set his hand on Izuku's knee, giving him a grounding squeeze. He doesn't miss the smile sent his way, nor does he miss the way Izuku's hand rises to his throat to rub against his scar. Fuck. Hitoshi really doesn't need a reminder of the one time Izuku got hurt and he wasn't there to mitigate or take care of him. Never again. He's never going to let something like that happen ever again. Izuku's staying in his sights as often as fucking possible. "Yeah," Izuku says, slowly, tone gentle and quiet. "More than once. But I was scared yesterday. Of course I was scared. I mean, I had a panic attack on the first day of class, you know. I'm scared a lot." He smiles and tilts his head, and though Hitoshi knows it's difficult for him, Izuku makes owning up to his weaknesses look easy. "But being scared isn't an excuse to not do anything, not in my opinion. At least, I didn't want any of you guys to get hurt in the hallway, which I knew was going to be packed and chaotic because everyone was panicking. I'm just glad that everyone heard me and listened." Certainly not a guarantee with this class, although Hitoshi had thought that Bakugo would be the biggest problem, but after whatever Izuku had said to him yesterday, even he's calmed down a little. Well, maybe calm down isn't the right phrase. He's still snappy and explosive and dismissive to the majority of the class, but he's not openly antagonistic, and he had been leading half of the class through the mess of panicked students toward Izuku. Maybe they're all just looking for a level-headed leader, and Izuku fits that bill perfectly. He's a mini Aizawa-san, after all, and he knows what it's like to have a shitty quirk that sometimes seems to do more harm than good. Amahaki is beautiful, though, in Hitoshi's extremely biased opinion. Any nightmares he used to have about the night that they were kidnapped often just dissolved into dreams about rippling black form that had kept him safe from harm. The only thing Hitoshi doesn't like about the hitchhiking god is that it hurts Izuku, not all the time, but enough of the time. He doesn't like it when Izuku's hurting. He doesn't like it at all. He tunes out the rest of the conversation in favor of focusing solely on his hazelnut and caramel monstrosity of a coffee. It's not hot anymore, and he considers tracking down Todoroki to warm it like yesterday, but he decides against that. Too many favors owed too quickly is probably not a good thing, although it did work to his benefit in regards to befriending Izuku, but that's different. They weren't favors from Izuku, they were gifts, because Izuku doesn't know how to go through life without giving away everything he has and more. It's incredibly sweet, but it's also deeply concerning. Hitoshi's doing his best to keep an eye on it, to not let it get out of hand. All right, gremlins. Aizawa-san's voice pulls Hitoshi back to attention, and his head swivels to look at where his teacher is standing in the aisle, hands braced on the seats beside him as the bus sways around a corner. You're going to be on your best behavior. The teacher leading this lesson will not put up with any misbehaving, and neither will Yamada-sensei or myself. Detentions are on the table. Don't think for a second that they're not just because this is a field trip, understood? Yes, sensei. Hitoshi chimes with the rest of the class. When the bus comes to a stop, Aizawa-san and Hizashi-san get off first, and Hitoshi is on his feet quick enough that none of the other students can beat him off the bus and trap him in his seat. He catches Izuku looking over his shoulder at everyone, and he can only imagine the look he gives them all, like a mom ready to be disappointed. Behave or else. It's easy to picture, and it makes him hide a smile in his capture weapon. The building looming over them all is huge, like fucking massive. Hitoshi would bet that it's larger than any sports stadium in the world, certainly larger than the stadium that the sports festival is held in, which is saying something, and who the hell knows what's inside? It can't be just a gym or a replica of an urban setting, because there are plenty of those within walking distance of the main building. Whatever they're here for, it's not sparring or quirk testing. Izuku catches up to him with a hand on his lower back. It's the USJ, he offers like he can read Hitoshi's mind. The unforeseen simulation joint. It was built 3 years ago, under the desire and direction of Pro Hero 13. Don't tell anyone I said that, though. I think 13's going to want to tell us himself. Is there anything you don't know? Hitoshi asks, unsure if he should be afraid of Izuku or impressed. Probably both. He's sure his expression is something stupidly fond, so he quickly hides it away in his lovely capture weapon. Humorously, Izuku actually takes a moment to think seriously about the question. I don't know much about the early 1900s or prior world history, to be honest. But you know about late 1900s world history? Hitoshi asks around a barely hidden laugh. Well, yeah, there's a theory that the very first quirks started appearing around then. They weren't as noticeable as like a glowing baby, but there's no way a glowing baby would have been the first quirk. That's not how evolution works. With a fond sigh, Hitoshi ruffles Izuku's hair and slouches into his side as Aizawa-san leads them toward the building. You're amazing, you know that? He asks into Izuku's ear. His proximity is rewarded by a deep blush spreading over Izuku's cheeks and up along his ears before Izuku shoves Hitoshi's face away. Worth it. On the other side of the massive entryway doors is the Pro Hero 13, her digitized helmet, projecting a sort of smile that's simultaneously unnerving in its inhumanness and comforting because its effort was put in to welcome them. And Hitoshi doesn't have any opinion of 13 aside from the fact that they do good rescue work, but he's entirely unsurprised to look to the side and see both Izuku and Uraraka with stars in their eyes like this is the best day ever. Hello, Class 1A, 13 greets, arms out wide, and they all gather around them. Welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ for short. This is where hero students get trained on rescue heroics. They turn around and start leading the way down a long, carpeted path into the massive dome building. Aizawa-san flanks the class on the left, and Hizashi-san takes up the rear. The massive doors seem to close on their own, but he supposes it's possible that there's a switch somewhere, likely under 13's control. 13 starts speaking again, but Hitoshi honestly tunes them out. It's rude, but rescue heroics isn't in his future. Sure, yeah, he'll likely have to do some rescuing, but the underground scene is not really about charging into a burning building or diving into rescuing people after a tsunami. He'll participate in the lessons and learn what he can, but an introduction to the USJ itself is not really in the books for Hitoshi right now. Izuku will just answer any of the questions later, if he has them. Because he's not paying attention, his eyes move around the dome and the 6 different areas housed inside of it, 7 if the fountain plaza is included, and it's in that spot that he notices something wrong. Sensei. Hitoshi holds his hand up, not caring that he probably just cut 13 off mid-sentence. What's that? Aizawa-san is closest to him, and Hitoshi sees him turn out of the corner of his eye, following Hitoshi's extended arm to the swirling mass of purple and black mist that's forming near the fountain. And then the mist grows, and people walk out of it, person after person, all of them costumed, and all of them sneering or whistling as they look around the USJ. The lights go out briefly and then come back on. Emergency generators. Is this part of the exercise? Someone asks, Kaminari maybe, but even they don't seem to think so. The words are too hopeful, too unsure. No, Hizashi-san says, running to the front to stand beside Aizawa-san. Those are villains. A man with light blue hair, covered in dismembered hands, what the fuck, steps out of the mist next, and then a giant hulking beast, and then a person seemingly made of the mist itself. The mist portal disappears, and the man covered in hands scratches his neck and looks around. Where's All Might? Our intel said he should be here. Intel? Were they behind the break-in yesterday? 13. Get the students out, now. Aizawa-san says, already in the process of pulling his goggles down. Dad! Both Aizawa-san and Hizashi-san turn at Izuku's voice. Izuku steps forward, just one step, his voice wobbles when he says, Please be safe, both of you. Hizashi-san offers his usual bright smile and gives a thumbs up. Stick with your class and call for help when you're out. Then he's racing down the steps, Aizawa-san right beside him. Hitoshi's stomach twists itself into knots in worry for his teachers, for Izuku's family. But he grabs Izuku's hand and yanks him away from the stairs and back toward the rest of the class in 13. Ida! Izuku pulls away from Hitoshi, hand outstretched as he approaches the other boy. Hitoshi tries to follow, but Izuku's faster in the moment, fear and shock, tripping Hitoshi's feet. Take my phone. There's a jammer in the area and you're the fastest. As soon as we get out, run to the school and call the moment that you get a signal. Nezu's hero number is speed dial 3, got it? He seems so fucking calm, even if Hitoshi's sure that inwardly Izuku is just this side of a panic attack. Ida takes the proffered phone and nods quickly, turning around to race toward the large doors that are already starting to open. The Mist villain appears in front of them, stepping out of its own portal. My apologies, he says, yellow eyes narrowing. It was not within the scope of our original plan to set upon all of you. However, as our true target is not here, I have been instructed to do just that. Let us see if All Might is any faster in responding to the sounds of children screaming, shall we? Two things happen almost simultaneously. The first, Bakugo and Kirishima moving from the right flank at the exact same time rush the Mist villain. The second, the span of a single breath later, a portal appears below Hitoshi's feet and he falls. For a moment, 3 seconds probably, and certainly no more than 5 seconds, Hitoshi's completely weightless. He sees the Mist villain, sees Izuku whip his head around like he's looking for something, and then it's just darkness. A split second of nothing. Then his stomach is in his throat as he's looking out over a new part of the USJ, and he has just enough common sense to look down before he plunges into deep, cold water. Landing feet first saves him. It still hurts, the shock of the impact from that height racing up through his heels, through his legs, and into his chest. But he isn't knocked unconscious from hitting the water. He holds his breath, and then he's submerged, shocked from the cold and the pain and the inability to see, but he knows which direction is up, so he starts kicking. Hitoshi breaks the surface with a huge gasp of air, starts a little too soon, as he sputters some water. Chlorinated, gross, from his mouth as he makes a poor attempt at treading to keep himself afloat. He's not a practiced swimmer, but he's doing his best. Trying to regain his breath, Hitoshi looks around at where he landed. Clearly, obviously, he's in the flood zone, but is he alone? There's another splash behind him, and he twists around to see something move through the water toward him, fast enough that it's creating a wake. A bad feeling settles into Hitoshi's gut, and he tries to kick away from whatever or whoever's approaching. Just as a fucking shark fin breaches the surface of the water, something wraps firmly around Hitoshi's stomach and yanks him out of the man-made pond. He collapses onto something metal, soaking wet and already starting to shiver. Rolling over onto his back, Hitoshi finds himself blinking up at Asui as she retracts her tongue back into her mouth. God, her quirk is cool. Thank you, he says as he forces himself to sit up. Are you all right? She croaks, sitting down beside him. I got Kaminari out first, because I didn't want him to accidentally electrocute himself. Blinking water out of his eyes, Hitoshi turns to find Kaminari peering over the edge of the railing in front of him. They must be on the boat, then. Shit. There's 6 villains, Kaminari says, voice shaking, with cold or fear or both, Hitoshi can't tell. They're all in the water. 2 of them are closer than the others. He turns his head to look at Hitoshi and Asui. I could shock them right now. Do not, Hitoshi says, reaching out instinctively to stop him with a hand on his wrist. We're on a metal boat. That would just be as dangerous to us as them. Oh, at least Kaminari has the decency to look sheepish for the suggestion. Right, sorry. So how do we get out of here? Asui asks, tilting her head. We're at least 10 meters from the shore, and neither of you can swim very well. Hitoshi really wishes that Izuku was here. He'd have a solution immediately, but he's not, and both Asui and Kaminari are looking at him like he's supposed to have all the answers, as if him being around Izuku all the time means he's absorbed some of Izuku's genius through osmosis. Shit. Fine, though. This is fine. He's been training under Aizawa-san for almost 2 years. He can handle this. Asui, how far can you jump? he asks, glancing quickly at her before looking away to study the boat. I can make it to shore, she croaks. But not with weight on my back. We'd end up in the water for sure, but my swimming wouldn't suffer for the extra weight. Hitoshi nods, taking in the information as he makes himself think through his shivering. Kaminari, do you have to touch something to use your quirk? I don't have to, but it's less dangerous if I do, he says with a quick shake of his head. Not ideal, but fine. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Hitoshi pulls off his dripping capture weapon and wraps it around Kaminari's waist. Asui, I want you to jump with Kaminari to shore. As soon as you're on land, I'm going to jump in, and you guys pull me with this. He wiggles the capture weapon for emphasis before wrapping the other end around his waist. As soon as I'm in range of your tongue, you might want to use that for the speed. Kaminari, as soon as I'm out of the water. Zap it. Try not to kill them. Asui, as it turns out, is great at following orders. She just turns back to Kaminari immediately and says, Get on. What? You're really going to carry me? Kaminari looks at Hitoshi with complete bewilderment. I'm stronger than you, Asui says, just as blunt as she was on the bus. Get on. Limb shaking, Kaminari crawls forward and wraps his arms around Asui's slender shoulders and then his legs around her waist. This is insane. What the fuck is even happening right now? Hitoshi can sympathize. This was supposed to be an introduction to rescue training, and now they're dealing with a villain attack. Fuck. He's probably going to have to start seeing his therapist again. This is so stupid. What the fuck is happening indeed? Something slams into the boat, and the metal groans beneath them. Now or never, he says, nodding at Asui. She doesn't hesitate, running straight to the edge of the boat and leaping over the railing. Hitoshi inches after her, peeking over the side to watch her trajectory through the air, and then her mostly clean splash into the water. She's a fast swimmer, and Hitoshi's capture weapon slips through his fingers as she goes. The villains don't even see her, their attention far too focused on the boat. When they reach the shore, relief floods through Hitoshi first, followed quickly by anxiety because now it's his fucking turn. Right here, right now, he's deciding that he hates water. He's never going to go swimming again. And the rain can piss off, too. Fuck this. He jumps. Izuku lands hard on his side, all the air in his lungs whooshing out of him. For a moment, all Izuku can see are stars as blackness sweeps over his vision, curling in with a rise of static in his head that promises to keep him safe, to keep him whole, if only he would let go of his restraint and tumble into it. He fights through the temptation to listen, pushing a hand against the whirl of amahaki in his sternum. This is not the time to take off his gloves and give in to the god. There are villains in the USJ for unknown reasons. He'd heard one of them say something about All Might, but the rest of his words weren't discernible for Izuku at that distance, and he needs to either find the rest of his class or get back to the plaza and help his dads. Izuku! Hey! Holy shit, are you all right? Blinking quickly to get rid of the darkness still dancing around his vision, Izuku drags his eyes around him for the source of the voice. Thankfully, it's made easy for him. Kirishima drops to his knees in front of Izuku and holds his hand out like he wants to grab his shoulder, but Izuku flinches away. Don't. I'm okay, Kirishima-kun. Coughing, Izuku pushes the hand under himself and sits up. Are you okay? What happened? He doesn't remember much. One moment Bakugo and Kirishima were running past him toward the Miss Villain, and the next thing he knew, he was falling into darkness. I'm fine. I hardened myself as I was falling. You don't look so great, bro. Are you sure you're all right? Kirishima still has his hand up, and he looks about 3 seconds away from turning into a mother hen, which is not at all what Izuku needs right now. Izuku pushes a hand through his hair and winces at the way that his sides protested the movement. I might have broken a rib when I landed. Thank God he didn't fall feet first, though, at the portal, or he would have ended up with a broken leg. And wouldn't that have been a bitch to hobble on trying to get out of here? Kirishima likely would have offered himself as a crutch, but Izuku's really tired of how much he's been getting hurt recently, and even the thought of physical contact right now makes him nauseous. I'm fine, though. I've had worse. Sad, but true. Kirishima still looks doubtful and concerned, so Izuku forces himself to put his hand on Kirishima's shoulder and squeeze. Focus, Kirishima-kun. We need to get out of here. Wherever the hell here is. There are buildings everywhere, all in some form of decay or ruin. Oh, the ruin zone. Has to be. Either that or they've been teleported all the way to one of the replica urban settings scattered around campus, but Izuku doubts that. There's still a roof overhead after all. Right, sorry, Kirishima trails off into a nervous laugh, his hand coming up to rub over his face. Sorry, okay. With a shake of his head, he punches his fists together, and Izuku watches as the uncertainty and fear slides off of him. All that's left in its wake is determination, and Izuku understands compartmentalization when he sees it. Kirishima's going to be a good hero one day, though it's sad that Izuku can already tell that being able to bulldoze your way through trauma is a reliable way to spot who can make it in heroics and who can't. Rapid-fire explosions pop off to Izuku's left, recognizable even though they're muffled from his fucked-up ear, and Izuku's on his feet in an instant. He rushes through the rubble, conscious of Kirishima trailing him, but far more focused on where he's putting his feet. Fuck. Bakugo, he calls because it has to be him. Bakugo, come this way. Amahaki is thrashing, writhing, screaming under Izuku's skin, flooding ice down his arms and coiling tightly around his ribcage. He wants to snap at the god that it's not being very fucking helpful right now, but he doesn't have the time or the energy. His probably broken rib is not happy that he's running, and that pain is enough of a distraction without pausing to reason with Amahaki. Bakubro, where the hell are you? Kirishima shouts from Izuku's right, and Izuku risks a glance at him, clocks his genuine worry, at the same time that he sees a shape moving in an alley behind him. Kirishima, duck! Izuku digs his foot into the ground to stop his movement, pivots on the ball of his foot to redirect his energy. Kirishima goes down, and Izuku leaps over him right as the villain steps out of the shadows of two collapsing buildings. The villain grins. Have you come to play with me? She asks, giggling as she claps her hands together, and something razor-thin and sharp shoots out of her touching palms. Izuku twists his torso and mostly dodges the attack, though he still feels whatever the hell she created slice his cheek. He rips off his glove as his feet touch down, and he knows that he should hesitate. He should. Any rational, normal teenager would hesitate, would stop, would freeze up. Attacking another person, even if it's in self-defense, should not be something that comes easy to him. But this isn't Izuku's first villain. If he kills her, it won't even be his first body. 37 villains. 2 civilians. He'd asked Nezu, after the kidnapping, after the nightmares had stopped, after he could get through the day and not fall apart any time that he caught a glimpse of magenta or blood red. Nezu had denied him the information. Izuku had asked again the next day. He had been denied again. On the third day, Nezu gave him an answer over tea, paws folded in front of him, half of the kettle gone between the two of them. 39 lives, all told. 39 ghosts all clinging to Izuku's back. Most of them didn't even have bodies to be buried, just bloodstains to clean up. Izuku drops 2 black holes behind the villain and flings her into the side of a building. She drops and crumbles, limbs slack and her head hanging down. He stares at her for a moment, watches her chest rise and fall. Rise and fall. When she doesn't get up, he puts his glove back on and turns to Kirishima, who's staring at him with wide eyes. We need to go, Izuku says, not unkindly. Kirishima nods and straightens up. Right. Thanks for having my back, bro. Izuku smiles, and he can feel the tightness at the corners of his mouth, but it's still an honest smile. He doesn't think that Kirishima's going to hate him after this, doesn't think that any of his actions will be held against him by anyone other than himself. They take off running again, following the sound trail of another burst of explosions, closer this time. Blood drips down Izuku's cheek, but he ignores it. It's not in his mouth or throat, so it's fine. This is fine. They just need to find Bakugo and then leave, get to the plaza and help Aizawa and Hisashi. Maybe Izuku will send Kirishima and Bakugo after their classmates, and yeah, maybe Izuku should join in the search. But fuck that. He's not leaving his dad's again. He trusted them when there was an option of getting out, of getting to safety, but the Miss Villain didn't let that happen. Izuku grabs Kirishima's sleeve and pulls him around a blind corner. At the end of the street, an explosion flashes and a villain races past. His probably broken rib, it's like Schrodinger's rib, he thinks, not broken until the X-ray says so, screams at him to stop fucking moving. And Izuku ignores it, easily, by sinking a little further into the static in his head. The static is safe, and Amahaki is much happier now after Izuku had taken his glove off earlier. He lets Kirishima burst into the open street first, fully hardened and able to take one of Bakugo's explosions if he happens to set one off without seeing them, which he does. Izuku's out 2 seconds after, swinging a punch at the closest villain as soon as he rushes up to them. A quick sweep of his eyes tells him that there are 15 villains here, not counting the 3 that are either dead or unconscious at the end of the street. Fine. Okay. Maybe a fistfight isn't the best way to deal with this. With a kick to the villain's solar plexus, Izuku rips his right glove off with his teeth and drops a black hole behind a cluster of villains, dragging them all into each other at high speeds. It doesn't knock any of them out, but it gives Bakugo enough space to come forward and help Kirishima. Bakugo, catch! Izuku spins around and kicks the villain that is rushing back at him, sending them stumbling back right onto Bakugo's explosions. The villain screams, and Izuku doesn't react, doesn't wince, doesn't care. Kirishima gives a hardened punch to the villain's temple, and they're unconscious. He runs up to Kirishima and Bakugo, eyes on the other villain as they circle the street. I can handle those 8, he says, pointing at the cluster that he just knocked together. If you 2 want to take care of the other 6. Kirishima punches his fists together, and Bakugo grins wide and feral. Sure you can take 'em, nerd. You look like you were limping coming around that corner. It would probably sound antagonistic to anyone else, but Izuku has learned a lot from his conversation with Bakugo earlier in the week, and that right there is concern. I'm fine. If you finish fast enough, you can help me. He gives a feral grin of his own, one that looks like Nezu and Aizawa, crazy and full of teeth and hardly human at all. If anything's going to motivate Bakugo, it's a challenge, and Kirishima has given every indication that he's good at and willing to follow the orders of whoever takes charge first. Oh, you're fucking on. Bakugo takes off, and Kirishima follows, leaving Izuku to the 8 that he'd identified for himself. Without his belt, he'd forgone his support equipment because he'd wrongfully assumed that they weren't going to have to actually do anything today. Izuku holds tight to his glove in his left hand and advances on the pack of villains. 2 of them jump up at him immediately, and Izuku flicks out another black hole to keep the others occupied while he deals with these 2. Once, several months ago, Aizawa had the brilliant idea to teach Hitoshi and Izuku how to fight against multiple opponents when they were alone. Both Hisashi and Auntie Kayama were present for and participating in the lesson. Of course, neither Hitoshi nor Izuku had lasted very long. Hitoshi had done a little better, since he had access to his capture weapon, but the spars weren't the important part of that particular Friday evening. No, the thing that Izuku took away from that lesson were the words that Aizawa gave him on the walk home. When you're fighting more than one opponent, your biggest ally is momentum, yours and theirs. Position yourself so that your movements take you toward both of them, or their momentum takes them toward each other. It's not about speed. It's not even about accuracy. It's about using every element of the battle in a way that benefits you. And then Auntie Kayama had ruffled Izuku's hair and told him not to worry about it too much, that he'd have plenty of time to practice before he ever needed to think about applying that new knowledge to a real scenario. The universe, it seems, hadn't gotten the memo. Izuku lets the 2 villains run at him, getting into a melee range before he ducks away, landing a kick to one of them to send them careening into the other. Their momentum swings them into a stumbling dive toward the ground, and Izuku uses that moment, when they're off balance and flailing, to set out a line of black holes that flings them into the side of a building. He doesn't look to see if they're still breathing when they crumple to the ground. The rest of the fight doesn't take long, none of the villains are particularly skilled, and Izuku has the advantages of range, power, and crowd control. He manages to knock them all unconscious, or maybe, hopefully not, kill them, the same way he had the first few. None of them learn from the villains that go before them. When the last of Izuku's 8 villains fall to the ground, he turns to see how Kirishima and Bakugo are doing. They only have 1 left, so Izuku leaves them to it and jogs to the edge of the street. He's hoping to see an end to this area, a view of the fountain or the plaza or something, but all he sees is more buildings, more rubble, more cracked pavement. Shit. He hisses between clenched teeth. What's up, Izuku? Kirishima asks, stopping beside him, just inside of Izuku's periphery. Well, that's all the villains handled, at least. Izuku releases his death grip on his glove and slides it over quickly on his hand, fastening it in place as he says, I need to get down to the fountain in the center of the plaza. Aizawa isn't used to fighting a lot of villains in a prolonged format, and Hisashi's quirk isn't made for working with a partner. Not to mention, whatever the hell that big hulking creature was that had stepped through the portal with the villains. They need help. What the fuck are we waiting for, then? Bakugo asks from Kirishima's other side. I have a score to settle with that damn warp villain anyway. Izuku throws his hand out to gesture at the buildings around them. I don't know where the hell we're going, and I don't want to use more of my quirk right now because quirk exhaustion's a real thing. It's not. Not for him, but he still has a stamina limit when it comes to Amahaki, so it's close enough. And I would actually like to make it to my dad's. Oh, Kirishima says, far calmer than either Izuku or Bakugo. I can help with that. We're in the ruin zone, right? That's in the northeast corner of the dome, so we just have to go that way. He points roughly to the left with a huge smile on his face. You're sure? Izuku doesn't want to doubt him, but he also really doesn't want to walk around in circles and waste time. But Kirishima takes it in stride. Hell yeah, bro. Got a great sense of direction. My family does a lot of hiking in the summer, and I used to have a part-time job showing tourists around my hometown. He taps his temple. There's a compass up here, I swear. Bakugo seems satisfied enough with that, because he starts walking immediately. Better than nothing. Let's go, nerd. Shitty hair, come up and take point. Kirishima laughs and jogs after him. You got it, Bakubro. Not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, Izuku catches up to them and pushes them into a jog, hard on his probably broken rib, but at this point he's kind of stopped caring about it. His pain tolerance is high enough to disregard it, and if anything was going to make it worse or jam it into his lung or something, it probably would have been the fighting. Light jog isn't going to kill him. Probably. They have to take a few detours around some collapsed buildings, but Kirishima always steers them back onto course, and before long, to Izuku's immense relief, they stumble past the last building and find themselves staring at the open plaza. Izuku's breath hitches as he scans the area. Bodies of villains litter the ground, some bleeding, most not. The warp villain isn't in sight, and Izuku sends out a thought, a prayer, that 13 is okay, that Ida got out, that the other teachers are on their way, and then his eyes find his dad's. Izashi's facing down against the villain that's covered in hands and a couple of other lower-level villains. His jacket is gone, leaving him in a red shirt that's soaked in sweat or worse. His support item is gone too, rendering his quirk attacks dangerous and therefore ultimately useless in the situation. He's bleeding from his arm. Izuku can see that even from here. It just makes his heart cinch in his chest. Aizawa's going against the hulking creature, the monster with the beak and the exposed brain. He's clearly tired, and his hair isn't even floating up to signal his quirk in use. The capture weapon in his hands is shorter than usual, too, probably used to bind villains, or maybe it had been cut off if it had gotten stuck on something. If the matchups were different, if Aizawa had the villains and Izashi had the creature, Izuku wouldn't be so worried, but as he steps forward, breaking out into a dead sprint as soon as he's clear of the rubble, he knows that something bad is going to happen. And it does, because of course it does, because Izuku is cursed and always has been. Izuku watches. It's all he can do, as the creature lunges to Aizawa. Faster than something its size should be able to move, and grabs him by the head. It slams Aizawa into the ground once. Twice. Izuku stumbles and almost falls to his knees. He loses his momentum, and he can't bring himself to start moving again. Time slows down. Izuku can feel Amahaki under his skin, rising up and almost bristling in anger, posturing like a threatened wild animal. Izuku is halfway through taking off his glove when the creature reaches down and breaks one of Aizawa's arms. "Eraserhead!" Izashi screams, but Izuku can barely hear it. There is a roaring in his ears, maybe his own heartbeat, maybe static, maybe Amahaki's many voices, but something in Izuku snaps along with Aizawa's arm. His glove comes off. The mark on his palm floods with red static and shoots out tendrils that race up his arm, black and red, shifting and swirling as they sear his skin with the cold that inhabits the emptiest parts of the universe. Izuku can't feel it. He takes a step. His arm raises up, palm out, finger spread, and all he can see is the creature pinning Aizawa to the floor in a crater that looks like a coffin, a crater covered in blood. Izuku's vision goes red, and Amahaki floods into his palm, coiling and pushing and gnashing its fangs. Izuku curls his fingers into a claw shape, and something, dark, hooked, inky cold, powerful, vengeful, strong, shoots across the plaza and winds around the creature. It's not dramatic. It doesn't slam the creature into the ground the way that the creature did to Aizawa. It doesn't pierce through the creature's body and hold it up like a head on a pike, like a warning to anyone who dares to cross it or its holder or its holder's family. It doesn't do any of that, because Izuku doesn't tell it to. It squeezes, it crushes, it pushes itself inside of the creature and becomes the gravitational mass capable of devouring stars, planets, galaxies. The creature vaporizes. There, one moment, looking whole and confused and unable to move, gone the next, in a spray of blood and nothing else. 40 ghosts. What the fuck? The villain, covered in hands, screams, half hidden behind Izashi but staring right at Izuku. You're not an NPC. All of you are supposed to be NPCs. The Nomu's strong enough to kill All Might. So who the fuck are you? Izuku staggers, energy leaking out of him through his palm, but he doesn't even think to close his hand or put his glove back on. This is the villain's fault. It's his fault that Aizawa was bleeding and broken on the ground. It's his fault that Izashi's trying his best to defend 20 students from villains when all he clearly wants to do is run and check on his best friend. It's his fault. I could kill him. You should. He raises his arm again, doesn't even care that the mist villain appears beside the one with the hands, doesn't even care that Izashi is shouting and holding his hand up to ward Izuku off, doesn't even care that there's a hand on his shoulder trying to pull him back. Izuku sways on his feet, but Amahaki's power is right underneath the surface, gathering within the confines of its mark and waiting to explode. Then All Might drops through the ceiling, cutting off Izuku's line of sight. I am here. Fuck! Izuku screams. He's 2 seconds away from dropping a line of black holes to make All Might get the fuck out of the way when fingers close around Izuku's own and force his palm closed. All of Izuku's strength leaves him in the moment that the marks on his forearm recede, and he drops to the ground like he suddenly found himself boneless. He's shivering. Why is he so cold? You fucking dumbass. Someone, Bakugo, hisses. We're your goddamn hand warmers. Aizawa, Izuku whispers, lifting his head despite his exhaustion. I need to get to him. I need to get to my dad. You need to relax, Izuku, Kirishima says, pressing down on his shoulders as Bakugo pats at the pockets of Izuku's gym pants. Shitty hair, go grab his glove. Got it. The hands leave his shoulders, but that does nothing to stop the panic rising in Izuku's chest. Dad! Someone drops into view on Izuku's right, nearly pressing up against Bakugo, who's still firmly holding Izuku's hand closed. Izuku looks up, blinking rapidly to dispel his tears, and finds himself looking at Izashi. He's bleeding in more than one place, mostly under his shirt, but part of his arm looks like it's just flaked off. Dehydrated or disintegrated or something. The muscle's exposed, the bone is peeking out. Izuku, Hizashi says, reaching out to set a hand on Izuku's cheek. Breathe for me, okay? Shota's already getting looked at. He's being brought to Recovery Girl, so I need you to breathe for me right now. Sobs rip their way out of Izuku's chest, and he doesn't even notice Kirishima returning with his glove until Bakugo shoves it onto his hand. Izuku sags forward into Hizashi's chest and cries. He wants to hold him, but he doesn't have the energy to lift his arms. He wants to see Aizawa. He wants to go back to this morning when everything was fine and nothing bad had happened. Shinso, come here. Izuku lifts his head, but doesn't pull out of Hizashi's arms. Toshi? He whispers, looking around for him with a fervor that, once he's more rational, he'll probably call hysterical. Hitoshi is in his field of view, and less than a second later, pushing his way into Hizashi's hug and clinging to Izuku as tight as he can. Hi. I'm okay, Toshi. Shut up, Hitoshi whispers, face buried against Izuku's neck. You scared the fuck out of me. Again. Guilt makes Izuku wince and hold his tongue. He wants to apologize, wants to promise that it'll never happen again, wants to whisk Hitoshi back in time to this morning and kiss him 1,000 times in preparation for all the shit that's happened since they arrived at the USJ. But he can't do any of that, so he just drops his head to Hitoshi's shoulder and cries until exhaustion finally takes him. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 30 of Swallow the Stars. Chapter 31 will be next. I hope you all are still enjoying this fic, and as always, thank you so much for listening.